Greeting, I'm Robert Pugh, and this is my beautiful wife,
Deborah Pugh, and we would like to say welcome to Intimate Conversation. Tonight our discussion is going to be about marriage and how intimacy relates to marriage. A lot of time when people enter into a relationship, we don't enter a relationship thinking about intimacy as a whole. We enter into it based on some of us as intimacy as it relates to sex, and so we find that a lot of relationships are not as healthy as they can be.
That's right, that's right.
When God created Adam, the first thing he did after he created everything along with Adam, he realized that it was not good for Adam to be alone.
That's right, that's right.
So he pulled something out of Adam that was already connected in Adam.
Come on.
So intimacy is a connection that's already in you.
That's right.
But a lot of people don't understand how to pull it out of it.
That's right.
So we find people that's in relationship just going along. We find people that's in marriage is like roommate.
That's right. Another thing too, it had to operate.
Right.
When he pulled Eve from Adam, she already had everything in her. So only thing they had to do was communicate. It had to be put in operation.
Exactly.
So it can work.
Exactly.
It's like you fixing something. It got to be put together so it can work.
Exactly.
So you got to have a communication with your spouse. You got to talk to one another.
Exactly. And that's why intimacy is important, because there's different levels of intimacy. And like you said, when God pulled Eve out of Adam, everything was in her that he needed, and what she needed was in him.
That's right.
And in order for them to operate as one, they had to put into operation those things which were inside them.
That's right.
And that's where intimacy plays an important part in a marriage.
That's right.
Because when we become married, we're not yet one.
Mm-hmm.
We're not yet one as in the physical, because there's a shedding that has to take place when you deal with intimacy. You just can't jump in a marriage and say, oh, we won't. And so a lot of people get married, and the first thing they say is, well, they ain't acting like they had before we got married, because they don't understand that intimacy involves growth.
That's right.
People want the red button, the easy button. And sometimes in wanting the easy button, the intimacy is cut off. So that's where you have a lot of people on that first, that lower level of just having sex.
That's right. And another thing too is like when you come into a marriage, you have to communicate.
Right.
You have to, because if you don't communicate, the departure is going to come. You're not going to understand one another. That's where communication came. That's how Adam got kicked out the garden. He stopped communicating with God.
Exactly.
He found himself hiding from God.
Exactly.
Because he stopped communicating with him. That's just like a spouse. You got to communicate with one another. If you don't, guess what? You will be in a house, she in one room, you in another room. Because you don't have nothing to say to each other, because you're not operating the communication.
Exactly. And as like you said, when Adam stopped the communication, the conversing with God, there became a departure that happened. And you find out in so many marriages that, like you said, the departure is there.
That's right.
And so just like God asked Adam, where are you? You find couples, married couples that are in marriage, and one of the spouses is like, where are you? Meaning, I see you every day in the house, but where you at?
That's right.
I hear you calling me every day on the phone, but where you at? It's because there's a disconnection. And when there's a disconnection, there's no intimacy.
That's right.
So you have spouses that end up frustrated. You have spouses that end up wanting to walk away from the marriage. You have spouses that end up getting mad with God because they feel like, well, God, if you gave me this person, then what is going on?
That's right.
But they don't understand that when it comes to intimacy, as I stated earlier, it's a growth process that must take place.
That's right. And another thing too, when you're in that relationship, you don't communicate. When you're in that marriage, don't communicate. It fades away. It withers away.
Right.
That's why so much marriages now across the nation even getting divorces for something so small, because we can't open our mouth up to even converse with each other, to communicate with each other. And it's so simple. It's so small. That's why Adam got lost.
Exactly.
He stopped communicating with God. And God wasn't his enemy. Your spouse ain't your enemy.
That's right.
Now you're one.
That's right.
So you have to communicate like communicating with one another like we want.
Exactly. And in doing that, we begin to learn one another. A lot of people I hear they define intimacy as into me you see.
Mm-hmm.
But as I begin to think on that and I begin to ponder that, it hit me. I don't just want somebody to see into me,
Mm-hmm.
because what good is a person seeing into me and don't understand what to do with what they see? And that's what we find out when it comes to relationship. A lot of people may see into their spouse. Let me change that. A lot of people don't see it in their spouse. But those that may see into their spouse, they don't know what to do with.
That's right.
So you find them speaking two different languages, and it's like somebody speaking Chinese and the other person American, and there's no translator.
That's right.
Because all you wanted them to do was see into you.
That's right.
But they must understand how to deal with what they see.
That's right.
And a lot of times people don't want to go below the surface. We got a lot of surface talk, and surface talk is good in its avenue, because you don't want to be below the surface all the time. So it has its place, but what we do when we look at this society, it seems like everybody want to stay above the surface. If anybody dare go beneath the surface, they are called, in the circle of Christianity, they're called religious.
That's right.
And religious people were never deep people.
That's right.
Religious people were people that had the form of deepness, but they were really shallow.
That's
so
right.
when we neglect the deepness in our marriage, what we find we have is a shallow marriage.
That's right. And another thing I want to say too, it's like when we get deeper, like you said, people don't want to get deeper.
Right.
Because they get deeper, stuff starts shedding off.
Come on now.
So, but the shedding off ain't bad. The shedding off good. Because when it starts shedding off, your marriage can grow stronger for more years to come, because everything now is shed off.
Exactly.
Because why? We communicate.
Exactly.
But we don't communicate, guess what? That stuff that was covered us, it's gonna get thicker and thicker. So it's not gonna get down to the griddle of it. It's gonna just stay there. So we got to communicate so that stuff can get shed off.
Exactly. Because when we communicate and we holding conversation, what happening is it's an exchange. You know, most people think when you hold a conversation, oh, it's just a conversation. No, I don't care how short a conversation is. An exchange took place. That's why you can hold a conversation with somebody and they can be smiling, but when you leave their presence, like you feel 100 tons of weight. It's because an exchange took place. So in your marriage, there's an exchange take place when you hold a conversation.
That's right.
You begin to learn who that person is. You begin to learn how they flow, how they operate. There's so many marriages that are operating based on surface.
That's right.
How you doing? How was work? It was fine. Okay. How you feel? And there's no deepness.
That's right.
So there can be no growth.
That's right.
Because you got one person that want to go deep and the other person, they ain't all into that. You know, I'm fine where I'm at. But one thing that I noticed, when you begin to go below the surface in a marriage, what happened is you can no longer turn the mirror on your spouse. You have to begin to turn the mirror on yourself.
That's right.
And going deeper in your relationship, in your marriage, causes you to do this. It causes you to see your flaws and your imperfection.
That's right.
And so you no longer can use, which most people use, I'm only human and nobody perfect. What happens when we continue to stay in this state in our marriage? Nobody changes for the better, because now I have a clutch that I'm human and I'm not perfect.
That's right.
But when I understand who I am, I don't have to say I'm human. I just live like God say live, and I understand that I'm a supernatural being.
That's right.
That is called a human being.
That's right.
And most people in a marriage, they live on the I'm only human side, because it does not challenge them to grow.
That's right.
And when you are challenged to grow, sometimes it hurts. You talked about the shedding. And the shedding is not a bad thing, but it can feel bad.
That's right. And I want to say one thing too. That's why David said, create in me a clean heart. Renew the right spirit within me. He had to get some stuff out of him for him to grow in God. That's just like with your spouse. We got to share some stuff with one another. if we deal with things, I'm talking to men right now because men, we keep things here.
Oh, yeah.
Now we're not verbally speaking out. That's why we got to put stuff in operation.
Yes.
So it can work for us.
Exactly. Because without operation, there's a stunt of growth. And what most people don't realize, when you're not exchanging and sharing with your spouse in a level outside of sex, what you're doing is saying I don't want you to get close to me. You're not verbally saying it, but your nonverbal action is saying that you can say I love you. But when you don't want to exchange and go on a deeper level, it's like saying I love you, but don't come close to me.
Come on now.
I love you, but I don't want you to see inside me. Because most people, when they meet each other, they meet the representative. And so when you're trying to impress somebody, you put on your best on the outside. When me and my husband met, there was no representative. Because first of all, we was not looking for each other to begin with.
That's right.
I was trying to get my life straight with the Lord when I met him. So there was no time to impress him. And there's nothing wrong with putting on your best to impress. But make sure inside the impression, they still getting the real you, if that makes sense.
That's right.
But when I met my husband, I didn't have time to impress him. So when he had met me, he wasn't trying to impress me. So what we got was the raw deal. We got was uncut. So we had to deal with seeing the real person outside, on the other side of being in Christ, that makes sense to some of y'all.
That's right.
So we got to see the imperfection, and we got to see the flaws, and there was no denial of he ain't dealing with that or she ain't got that issue. Like most people, they get so far in love that they become blind. And so we saw each other.
That's right.
At the level that God wanted us to see before we got married.
That's right.
Because let's be honest, if God showed us everything about the person that we're gonna marry, before we marry, half of us will go straight from there.
We're gonna run another way.
Because we are not at that time able to deal with it.
That's right. That's right. That's why communication, relation plays a big part in your marriage.
Right.
You know, so